Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Snetterton for the latest instalment of racing within the Ginetta Motorsport family. And we're kicking off our day and a half of racing here in the southeast with the opening race of the weekend of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. The drivers have had a couple of weeks to relax, but it's been a very busy summer period so far for the drivers, who we last saw at a British GT event at Donington Park. That was 3 weeks ago. The very next weekend, they went and competed at the Ginetta Festival, the first ever Ginetta Festival at Silverstone, where each of the classes had a minimum of 9 races. And in fact, the drivers in this category had 10 races over the course of the, 7 races, excuse me, over the course of the weekend. And then they had a weekend off, and they're back here again at Snetterton to do it all again. A very, very close qualifying session earlier on today has given us the grid, and hopefully will mean that we're in for 20 action-packed minutes of racing, with 3 races this weekend for the Ginetta GT Championship. 1 today, and then they will have 2 on the main race day at Sunday. Championship being led by Luke Reed, as has been the case really all season long. Started his winning streak back on Easter weekend at Alton Park, where he won all 3 of the races, then won another race at Silverstone at the British GT meeting, won 2 at Donington before having a mysterious mechanical fault on the grid ahead of the 3rd race of the weekend. And then all of a sudden, Luke Reed's championship, I won't go as far as to say it started unravelling at Ginetta Festival, because he still managed to win 2 of the 7 races that weekend, but he did seem oddly off the pace for a little period of time over that weekend, and he will be hoping to bounce back nicely here at Snetterton to extend his points lead, which already sits at nearly 100 points. He is on 422 points. Carl Garnett second in the championship, 334, and then Callum Davis only a point further back in 3rd on 333 once the drop scores are taken into account. So it really is that fight for 2nd in the championship that is likely to keep us the most entertained as the season goes on. So, good crowd on hand at an overcast and blustery but still very mild Snetterton circuit as the green flag lap gets underway then for our first racing action of the weekend. There is a threat of some rain later on this afternoon, and I have to say, having just popped out of the commentary box briefly before the cars were released to the grid, did feel a little bit like there could be some rain on the way, so we'll wait and see. Hopefully they can get through this race at least without the heavens opening. 2 classes of car, as we're used to seeing. We've got the GTP cars, that's the G56s, and then you've got your GT5 challenge entrants, and lost a couple of those for this weekend, but we still have Luke Garlick, championship leader now, 6 times a winner within the GT5 Pro class. Ella Lloyd, 2nd in the championship, has arguably been the quicker of the 2, but had a number of non-finishes over the first half of the season, which she'll really be looking now to try and iron out through the second half of the year. She is 53 points adrift of Luke Garlick once those drop scores are calculated, so work to be done for Ella if she is to steal the championship away from him. So cars making their way then around the green flag lap. The grid headed by Luke Reed. So Luke, I mentioned, had that little dip in form at Silverstone, but he's back on top again here so far at Snetterton. His lap time in qualifying, a 158.384 though, only a 1/10 of a second quicker than Callum Davis. Callum Davis 3rd in the points, remember 1 point adrift of Carl Garnett. Well, Garnett only starting on the 3rd row for this race, so advantage there for Callum Davis. We could well see a change for 2nd in the championship after this race, if the grid positions are anything to go by at least. Row 2 then for Blake Anglis and Ruben Haig. Blake Anglis raced for the first time this season at Silverstone at the Ginetta Festival. He's back again here at Snetterton. Ruben Haig had a bit of a nightmare over the last couple of rounds. Donington Park, he was excluded from the entire meeting and then bounced back quite nicely at Silverstone by winning the first 2 races of the Ginetta Festival and being a consistent point scorer on the Saturday and Sunday as well. Row 3 then is where you find Carl Garnett, the number 19 car, who is 2nd in the championship with Leona Theobald alongside. Leona Theobald had a couple of mechanical issues, a gearbox change, I seem to remember it was at the Ginetta Festival, but she has qualified well in 6th. That's one of, if not her actual best qualifying effort of the season so far. Then Colin White, Ginetta veteran, starts 7th alongside Bal Sidhu on row 4, and then the back row of the GTP grid is Sean Fleming and Gary Wager. Then miss a few rows, there'll be a delay of 10 seconds, I think it is, before the GT5 cars get released, and it's Sam Harvey who has got the pole position. Sam Harvey still looking for his first class win of the season, and those of you who tuned in to the Silverstone event, not the Ginetta Festival, but the British GT event a couple of months ago now, may remember Sam Harvey's involvement in a sizable lap 1 accident at Beckett's. Well, they got the car fixed and back out for the rest of the season, and Sam has been quick and has managed to notch up so far 9 podium finishes, but none of them on the top step. So Sam Harvey would love to change that here today. He will head up the GT5 Challenge grid. Alongside him will be Ella Lloyd, and then the championship leader Luke Garlick. So Ella Lloyd really needs to start outscoring Luke Garlick if she is to have a chance of the title, and she's doing well in out-qualifying him by 1 position for this race. Will Rochford will be on the second row and Karib Sekat now the only AM driver, because Pablo Jequier would believe we may not be seeing for the rest of the season. So Karib Sekat at the back of the GT5 grid now with no one else to fight with it in his class, but still looking to try and finish as well as he can overall with the GT5s. So cars line up on the grid. 20 minutes of Ginetta GT Championship racing await. Once those GT5 cars are in position at the back, we'll be good to go then. Luke Reed, the 26 car, the Wolf Motorsport car on the left. Alongside him, Callum Davis from SVG Motorsport. And keep an eye to Carl Garnett, the grey and orange number 19 car, moving forward, he hopes, from 5th on the grid. 2 by 2, very narrow start line here at Snetterton. Let's hope they keep it clean on the run to the first corner of Riches. The lights are out. Carl Garnett has made a good start there from the 3rd row, goes straight at the middle of Ruben Haig and Blake Anglis to try and take 3rd place. Luke Reed versus Callum Davis is still a touch and go for the race lead, but Luke Reed gets through Riches with the advantage. Davis 2nd, looks as though Anglis will stay 3rd, and now Carl Garnett actually in danger of being hung out to dry on the outside as they barrel down to the Wilson hairpin. In the GT5s, it looks like Ella Lloyd has got herself into the class lead, and Garnett does slip out wide at the hairpin. Back through goes Ruben Haig, and alongside him now comes Colin White, who's made one of his typical Colin White starts, leapfrogging ahead of both Leona Theomold and nearly Carl Garnett. In fact, he will go around the outside of Carl Garnett and move into the top 5 already. Down towards Agostini for the first time then, and hopefully those really close qualifying times are going to translate into a good race. We saw some fantastic racing the last time these cars were on the British GT package at Donington, and hoping for more of the same here at Snetterton. Sam Harvey there drifting out wide in the GT5 pack. 2nd place he now runs behind Ella Lloyd as the GTP field makes its way through Oggies, then Williams, and out onto that Bentley straight and towards Brundtland Nelson, which is a definite overtaking opportunity if you're close enough, but no one really able to stick with Luke Reed on this opening lap. Callum Davis did his best to go with him through the first few corners, but is now slipping back as there Sam Harvey and Luke Garlick debate 2nd within the GT5s. Now, these cars really do slipstream well, so the Bentley straight is a great opportunity for Luke Garlick to have a go at Sam Harvey. Let's see whether or not he chooses to do so. Overall race leaders through Brundtland Nelson, then the left and the right, then down towards the bomb hole, and at the end, ultimately, of the opening lap, there is Ella Lloyd, who is 2nd. Well, it's side by side, and Luke Garlick up the inside of Sam Harvey, who drifts out wide onto the grass. Through also now will come number 42, Will Rochford, and Will Rochford, who also made his, well, he missed the first round of the Will Rochford well off, though, well off for the bomb hole. And that will now send him well out of that battle for podium placings. I was about to say missed the first round of the championship and didn't race at Donington either, so a park campaign for Will Rochford, but unfortunately his latest venture into GT5 racing not going all that well with a lap 1 off. Lap 1 completed then, Luke Reed leads the way, Davis 2nd, Anglis 3rd, Haig 4th, and then Colin White in 5th, but Carl Garnett looking to the inside of him towards the Wilson hairpin. It's there. Number 84, Blake Anglis, looks to try and put the pressure on Callum Davis. Now, Davis did close in slightly through the remainder of that opening lap. Remember, I said that he was dropping back slightly in the middle part of the lap, but towards the end of that first lap, Callum Davis able to sort of match Luke Reed. So the gap only 6/10 at the end of that opening lap. He's bringing Blake Anglis with him. There, Colin White still heads Carl Garnett in their fight for 5th position. Colin White, 1 victory so far this season, that coming in our most recent race, actually, at the Ginetta Festival. A race that saw a fair amount of carnage and confusion, it must be said, but Colin, in true Colin White fashion, able to pick his way through the drama and got himself that first race victory. Lost count, as I suspect, as Colin now, how many Ginetta races he's won, and by far the most experienced driver on the grid. Good to see he's still got it. Right, race leaders down the Bentley straight. Fractionally quicker in Sector 1 there was Callum Davis than Luke Reed, although actually Ruben Haig in 4th, quicker than them all through the first part of the lap and through Sector 2. So Ruben Haig reeling in the top 3 now. There goes the number 16 car of Balsidu. And there, Ella Lloyd continuing to lead in the GT5s with now Luke Garlick second. So that's not great news for Ella. You get 35 points for winning a race in this championship. You get 30 for finishing second. So right now, she's only taking 5 points out of Luke Garlick. Could have done with Sam Harvey sort of putting up a bit more of a fight there. Not that he rolled over and let Garlick through, but by running wide onto the dirt out of Nelson, made life a lot easier for Luke Garlick, who there you saw drifting beyond the edge of the curb coming out of the bomb hole. Got to be careful with doing that now. We're running to the new Motorsport UK track limits regulations, so no part of any tyre is allowed to go beyond either a white line or the back edge of the red and white painted curbs. So got to be careful through some of those high-speed corners in particular, not to wander out beyond those track limits. Penalties could well be coming your way if you do. Lead gap went up by a 10th that time around. It was Luke Reed in the end who set the fastest lap on that first full flying lap of the race, but the top four all remarkably evenly matched, really, within a couple of tenths of each other. As Callum Davis tries to hunt down Luke Reed. Luke very late on the brakes into Agostini, but you can take that wide entry, get the late apex, carry the momentum then down the short straight towards the left-hand kink, a bit more than a kink maybe at Hamilton. Careful not to hit the tyre stack on the inside, not to run over the curb too far on the exit, which most of them managed to do. There, Colin White runs in 5th position now, seemingly keeping Carl Garnett at bay relatively easily. So this has not gone to plan for Carl Garnett. Made a good initial launch off the grid, but then ended up slipping back one place from where he started. And that means that his second place in the championship is very likely to slip away in this race. Reed nose dips as he hits the brakes hard into Brundle and Nelson. That change of direction, a really awkward part of the circuit because you're braking on a turn and it's bumpy, and then you've got to try and flick it back the other way into Nelson, the right-hander. Leona Theobald there, the number 8 car, having a really, really good run. Okay, she's lost a couple of places from where she started, but sticking with Colin White and Carl Garnett ahead of her. In what is a much more competitive showing than we've seen at times from Leona, who's hunting her first podium of the season. She has, I believe, had a top 5 earlier on in the season. Yes, she has, back at Donington Park in the middle race. 8th place where she runs for the time being. Race leaders then up towards the Wilson hairpin, and that lead gap just kind of creeping out by a 10th or so a lap, which really makes perfect sense because Luke Reed was almost exactly a 10th of a second faster than Callum Davis in qualifying, so it stands to reason that that's his race pace advantage as well. Although in the first sector of this lap, I would argue that Callum Davis perhaps got a fraction closer. Maybe Luke had a bit of a moment through the Wilson hairpin. It does look as though the left front corner of Luke Reed's car is not quite in showroom condition as well, doesn't it? The headlight perhaps popping out slightly. I don't know if that's contact or just from a curb strike, but he is slower by 3/10 in the first sector than Callum Davis, and Blake Anglis actually a further 10th quicker than that. So the lead three once again starting to concertina back together. As Callum Davis, perhaps now he's got the tyres into the ideal operating window, is finding a bit more performance, a bit more confidence in the car more than anything. And as they make their way out of Williams, that lead gap perhaps continuing to come down on this 4th lap of the race. Long lap here at Snetterton, just a fraction under 3 miles the length, and so 2-minute lap times are the norm for these cars. Not going to get a huge amount of laps in during the race distance, but that might not be bad news if your name is Luke Reed, because he's really starting to come under some pressure now from Callum Davis, who was another 10th faster in sector 2 on this lap than the leader. There, Carl Garnett makes his way out of Nelson towards the right-hander at the bomb hole, and he's really dropping away now from Colin White, isn't he? So Garnett getting away from Theobald, but well, these three were quite close at the start of the lap. The gap's really extending on this 4th lap of the race in the midfield, not at the head of the field though, where Callum Davis is doing his best to go after Luke Reed. Let's see then, it was 9/10 of a second the cushion at the end of 3 laps, at the end of 4 laps, 7/10 the advantage. And so Callum Davis that time 2/10 faster than the race leader. Blake Anglis, by the way, must have made a mistake in the final sector because he had been gaining on those two, but you can see now that 3rd place car a little bit further back, having dropped a chunk of time in sector 3. There is the number 84 car of Blake Anglis. Works his way through the left-hander at Palmer's. Blake, I think, was a late entry to this weekend's event as well, so just sort of picking and choosing which rounds he wants to compete in, but we're very happy to have him here now. Callum Davis storming up behind Luke Reed under braking there into Agostini. Took another 2 and a bit tenths out of him in sector 1, so that first half of the lap in particular, Callum Davis seems really strong. It's the final sector where Reed kind of pegs him back a little bit, but Callum Davis knows the significance here of trying to score as many points as he can, even if Luke Reed ultimately might be a bit too far away in the championship to think about beating overall. That fight for second in the points is something that Callum will very much be thinking about, and he will want just the race wins, really. He hasn't had a win yet this season. He has had 10 podium appearances from 14 races so far, Callum, and he's been knocking on the door of a race win on a few occasions, just not quite happened. Body language of that car, though, really does say attack, attack, as he hits the brakes through Brundle and Nelson there. Perhaps a little bit later than Luke Reed, I would argue, although Reed was a 10th faster in that middle sector than Davis chasing him down. And again, Callum just wandering a bit wide of the ideal line maybe through Coram there, although it's such a long corner, Coram, these days, since it was reprofiled, well, 12, 13 years ago now. But there are a variety of different lines that you can take. This then the fight for third within the GT5s, because Sam Harvey has been caught by Will Rochford, and Will Rochford, remember last time we saw of him, was making his way towards the A11 going through that part of the circuit, but he's managed to get it back on the track, clearly, and is chasing down Sam Harvey. In fact, might be alongside him now as they head down towards the braking zone under the bridge. End of the Bentley straight. Can he go the long way round through the left to get the inside for the right-hander? That's what he's going to try, and it looks like that's what he's going to do. Will Rochford with a superb bit of driving. Moves into third place in the class, but then runs wide over the grass, keeps his foot in it. The grass, of course, very, very dry after the several weeks of nice weather that we've had here in the UK. And that his saving grace really there, because he didn't have to worry about losing too much traction, but very much exceeded track limits in doing that. We'll wait and see if anything comes of that. But he's already starting to scoot away now from Sam Harvey, who just hasn't quite had the pace in the race that he had in qualifying this morning, where he did a 2:07.7, his best race lap so far for Sam Harvey, a 2 minutes 8.6, so a full 9/10 slower than he went in qualifying, Sam Harvey. Although that might be the trend across the field, really, because Luke Reed's pole time was a 58.3, his best lap of 59.3. Now, we're getting a notification on our timing screen that's not terribly relevant to this race in some ways, because it says that the GB3 race that's coming up next has been declared wet. The significance of that being that it is raining somewhere around the circuit, so we're not really seeing any of that on the cameras, but I believe it may well be around the start-finish area where the rain is starting to come down, and that maybe now explains why Luke Reed, as the race leader, is really starting to struggle for pace, because Callum Davis is closing him down again on this lap. The gap was 7 and a bit tenths at the start of it. It's well under that now as they turn, and there, spot of rain on the camera lens at Murray's. So definitely weather starting to close in a lot earlier in the day than this rain was forecast. We thought maybe it would come towards the very end of the day. Well, we're barely past lunchtime, but already the weather's starting to turn. Another 2/10 gain there by Callum Davis, who still has the best part of 8 minutes to try and negotiate the race leader and the season-long championship leader, Luke Reed, to deny him another victory, what would be Luke's 9th of the season, and for Callum, claim his first in the championship. Out of the Wilson hairpin then. Again, this is the part of the circuit where really Davis has been strong. You can see that he gained under braking into the hairpin, but then didn't lose that time on exit, as you would typically see. So the front end of that number 95 car in second place working really, really well. But can he use that to make a decisive move for the lead? Again, the front of the car lurches down into the braking zone at Agostini. Just a touch too far back to really commit to an overtake. So rain now appearing on this camera lens as well, up at the end of sector, well, middle of sector 2 really this is. Through Oggies, through Williams, onto that Bentley straight. It's not enough, it's sort of psychological rain at the moment, I would call it. It's not actually affecting the grip levels as far as I can tell. but it's just appearing on the windscreen, making the drivers doubt themselves, second guess how much grip they're going to have when they get to the next braking point. And then, of course, Luke Reed as the leader is the first to try and discover all of that. We are getting windscreen wipers coming on now, though. Callum Davis and Blake Anglis in the background. Luke Reed is sideways there as he tips it into Nelson, and I think it was coming down a bit more heavily there. So now, life about to get very interesting. The point I've been trying to make is that Reed, as the race leader, arrives at every corner as the pioneer, whereas Callum Davis behind can sort of gauge the grip levels by watching what the car ahead of him is doing. If he sees Reed have a slide, then he has at least a fraction of a second to react to that and just back things off for a corner or two. So it's more likely, in a way, that Reed would make the mistake than Davis, but Reed pushing on, just gaps him by a car length or so through that final couple of corners. So 6 minutes to go. The wind really picking up here at Snetterton. There is a Marshall I can see out of the commentary box window, and you saw her there in the background holding a black and white warning flag out to someone for exceeding track limits. Well, she's barely hanging on to the flag, so strong is that gust of wind down the pit straight. It's extremely blustery today, and that's blowing the weather in. The skies are darkening all the time. But still, Luke Reed, touch wood, not succumbing to the pressure. Now, Ella Lloyd, same story, you see. Ella is the leader in the GT5s. She has no idea where the grip is going to be as she goes into every corner, whereas Luke Garlick behind has been able to use that to his advantage. He's closed in on Ella Lloyd, and now the top two in the GT5 Championship find themselves nose to tail for the lead of the race with a quarter of it to go. The Zentek Motorsport prepared cars, both of them. They had a little tangle at Silverstone last time out, actually, which I'm sure made the team debrief pretty interesting, but they have dominated that class for Zentek Motorsport. Now, really, we'll spend the second half of the season debating which of the two drivers are going to claim the championship honours. Advantage in the points to Garlick right now, but in track position, it's Ella Lloyd who finds herself ahead, down towards Rich's corner. Windscreen wiper sort of stuttering around on the 28 car there in the lead of the race, but she commits to that really quick double apex right-hander. A little bit more, I would say, than Luke Garlick behind. So, although Luke closes in under braking into Agostini, wasn't able to get up the inside. That's how important that first turn was for Ella, because had she not nailed Rich's, then she probably would have been vulnerable into the braking zone at the Wilson hairpin. Up through Williams down towards the braking zone, and Agostini. Is this where Luke Garlick maybe tries to make the move? Dropping downhill, Ella Lloyd just covering the middle ground in case an attack comes. Will she then wander back to the racing line? Well, no, she can't, because Luke Garlick is there trying the outside line into the hairpin. But Ella Lloyd stays in front. Luke Garlick just trying to bide his time. He has got a handy points cushion, doesn't need to do anything rash here. He's already picked up 10 penalty points over the course of the season. And does not want to add to that, because you can't use them as drops either if you start getting penalty points or disqualifications. So, not that I'm suggesting for a moment he would do anything dirty, but if he does go for a move and the door is closed, that can end in contact, which clearly is something to be avoided. Down the back straight now, that slipstream's surely allowing him to think about the inside, which it does, but he can't get there. And Ella Lloyd trying to make that the widest Ginetta in existence. Spoke earlier on about how narrow the pit straight is here at Snetterton, but that Bentley straight a lot wider seemingly, and so you really can sort of make it difficult for the car ahead to defend, as we saw. And Ella Lloyd did a sterling job, actually, of covering all paces there. So Luke Garlick still sat in her wheel tracks as this first of 3 races this weekend for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship draws to its conclusion, with both classes at the moment seeing very small lead margins. It's 8.5 tenths Luke Reed to Callum Davis at the front of the field. And here in the GT5s, even closer, only 2 tenths in at that time as they came across the line. But again, Ella Lloyd supremely confident through Rich's corner. And although she loses a touch on exit speed, Garlick just can't quite get alongside her into the braking zone at the hairpin. So 2 minutes to go. Leaders next time by will be starting their final lap of the race. The overall race leaders, by the way, in fact, about to do that now. They're just coming across the timing line now. And as the GT5 contenders head down into the braking zone at Agostini, it gets closer and closer again, with still Ella Lloyd just able to hang on in front. Lots of drivers, by the way, being warned about exceeding track limits, but none of them yet being given a penalty. Ella Lloyd is one of those drivers, but then so is Luke Garlick behind. They're both on a warning at the moment for exceeding track limits. So too is Sean Fleming within the GTP class, and Callum Davis, interestingly, as well. So Callum Davis perhaps explains why he's dropped a few tenths to Luke Reed over the last lap or so, just trying to make absolutely sure that he doesn't pick up a penalty that would then ultimately cost him a podium finish. GT5 leaders back down into the braking zone at Brundle and Nelson, late on the brakes for Ella Lloyd, which means that she keeps Luke Garlick at arm's length. They make their way into the bomb hole once again. These cars, of course, with still just over a lap to do, whereas the GTP field, they're heading onto the Bentley straight for the final time, and Luke Garlick runs very wide there out of the right-hander at the bomb hole. Meanwhile, race leaders down the back straight, and Luke Reed looks as though he's going to do this, doesn't he? He has had an incredible hit rate so far this season. 13 of the 14 races this year have seen him on the podium. The only time he's missed the podium was that non-start that he had at Donington Park, so he really has been the class of the field in the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship, and he's going to continue that here with a 9th race victory of the year. Turns his way through Coram Corner, onto the brakes now, through Murray's. The sun's starting to shine again here at Snetterton after that brief shower that hit us mid-race and threatened to derail things. But for Luke Reed, nothing could unseat him from the race lead, despite race-long pressure from Callum Davis. It's another win for the championship leader. Wolf Motorsports celebrate again. 2nd for Callum Davis, 3rd in the end, a relatively lonely 3rd for Blake Anglis, although it was becoming less lonely towards the end as Ruben Haig was closing in. Now, that race has finished. The GT5s have the best part of a lap still to do, and Luke Garlick goes from the outside to the inside, almost down at Agostini, and starting now to get desperate. He's well over the curbs again and needs to be careful about these track limits. Down to Hamilton, hooks that inside curb but stays neat and tidy on corner exit this time, which is good to see. Then they make their way into the right-handers, first at Oggies, then at Williams, and surely now the decisive moment in this race will be at the end of this next straight, the Bentley straight, the longest straight on the track, down to the fastest point on the track, and therefore the point at which this slipstream is at its most powerful. Ella Lloyd sitting in the middle of the road. She's now sort of merging over to the left-hand side to defend. All right, Luke Garlick goes to the outside, again switches to the inside. He's late on the brakes, but Ella Lloyd is later. Dirty side of the road there for Luke Garlick as well. Both of them nearly missing the corner completely, but it is Ella Lloyd who manages to hold on. Luke Garlick well wide over the curbs again. And now I don't think, unless we see a mistake from Ella, she's going to be beaten. This would be a really significant victory. It will actually put them level on number of wins, 6 wins apiece, 1 fewer podium for Ella Lloyd. But she has been just slightly the less consistent of the two, and so when she's not been on the podium, she's often been in a gravel trap somewhere. Not today at Snetterton, though. It's another Zentek Motorsport 1-2, but this time the championship leader has to settle for 2nd place. Ella Lloyd punches the air into light after a magnificent drive there to retain the race lead and reclaim a few points in the championship over Luke Garlick in 2nd. Of the two of them, by the way, it was Luke Garlick who had the fastest lap. In fact, no, Will Rochford set the fastest lap, so the bonus point for the fastest lap doesn't go to either of the championship contenders, so it is a 5-point gain for Ella Lloyd. 35 points in the bank as well for Luke Reed for winning that race. 36, in fact, if you count the fastest lap, and 37 if you count the pole position, which they definitely will be. Bonus points for both of those things. And so Luke Reed racking the points up nicely now as we move into the 2nd half of the season at round 15 of 26. And with still a lot of racing to be done this year, he's not going to be officially crowned the champion for a little while, but he's certainly getting closer and closer with every race. And with Carl Garnett 2nd in the championship, only managing 6th place in that race, it's looking highly unlikely, really, that anyone's going to be able to take the fight to Luke, unless he were to have a disastrous weekend. But that just doesn't look likely to happen, does it? He'll be back out again for 2 more races tomorrow here at Snetterton, where he'll be hoping to add further to his points tally, to his win tally. one more win, and he's in double figures for race victories, which would be quite an astonishing feat, especially given the fact that this grid, whilst lacking a little in numbers, has not been lacking in ability or competitive racing. We've had some really close racing, particularly over the last couple of events, and we've had it proven to us that other drivers can win races. In fact, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different drivers winning in the GTP class this season. A 9th now for Luke Reed, but there's been a win apiece for Carl Garnett, Colin White and Connor Garlick, and then 3 wins for Ruben Haig as well. So other drivers can win, but just not with the consistency that Luke Reed can, and he claims his 9th of the season here at Snetterton for Wolf Motorsport. 3 different teams on the podium though. Callum Davis for SVG Motorsport 2nd, and the Breakall racing car of Blake Anglis was 3rd. Ruben Haig 4th, his teammate. Then Colin White in 5th after that good start. Carl Garnett, after a good initial start, ends up down in 6th ahead of Leona Theobald, Bal Sidhu, Sean Fleming and Gary Wager. Then it is Ella Lloyd who claims the victory in the Zentech Motorsport battle at the front of the GT5s after that brilliant last few laps defence really. Luke Garlick 2nd, Will Rochford 3rd, Sam Harvey a disappointed 4th from pole, and Karim Sekat in 5th place. So that's how our opening race of the weekend went, and we'll remind ourselves in a minute of some of the highlights of that race, I'm sure, but they'll next be back out on track 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So the drivers need a good night's sleep because they're up bright and early on Sunday morning to do it all again. As out of the car there gets Bal Sidhu. Now, I think I erroneously said before Karim Sekat was the only AM in the GT5 grid. I was, of course, mixing him up with Bal Sidhu, who's moved up into the GT Pro field for this weekend. The first race of the weekend at Snetterton then for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship saw a very even start. Callum Davis actually had his nose ahead briefly of Luke Reed into turn 1, but Luke was able to ultimately convert pole into the race lead. Davis went with him in the early stages, whilst further back the GT5 pole sitter Sam Harvey had a bit of a nightmare in the opening lap. Ella Lloyd beat him into turn 1, then Luke Garlick and Will Rochford took advantage of that grassy moment to go through before Rochford fired himself off the road completely. He would later find himself battling Sam Harvey again on the track in what was a fantastic fight for 3rd place. Callum Davis was pushing to the limit and perhaps slightly beyond there as he cut through Brundle and Nelson as he tried to chase after the race leader. Sam Harvey and Will Rochford, there was their battle for 3rd place, and Rochford went round the outside through Brundle, got the inside for Nelson, ran onto the dirt a little bit but made 3rd place his own. It was though Luke Reed, who once again proved himself to be unstoppable. Despite a mid-race rain shower and pressure from Callum Davis, Reed was able to claim a 9th victory of the season here at Snetterton.